Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Shop online and get $30 off your first online order when you use code SAVE30 at checkout. Get the same prices, deals, and rewards as in-store. Get started at Safeway.com or the Safeway app.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
A cornucopia of arts performances. That is how the Green Box Arts Festival puts it. And it's back for another season this June. The 2-week celebration brings dance, sculpture, music, and more to the mountain town of Green Mountain Falls. So, if you're looking for something a little out of the box, it might be worth marking your calendar. I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel.
And I'm Bazi Kanani. Coming up, Governor Polis puts new pressure on cities and towns that resist state law on affordable housing.
So these are the laws of Colorado, and of course, they need to be followed.
Then, as a federal panel looks into alleged antisemitism at a Colorado campus, student protest leaders defend their efforts.
We oppose all forms of bigotry.
You'll hear new details about how campus leadership responded to last year's anti-war protest.
And the send-off for Colorado's newest graduates wouldn't be complete without some words of wisdom.
The gap is the space between where you are now and where you want to go.
It's Monday, April 19th. Here's the news in Colorado today.
Colorado could withhold more than $100 million in grants for cities and counties that don't comply with state housing laws. That plan is outlined in a new executive order signed by Governor Jared Polis. CPR's Benta Birkeland spoke with the governor just before he made the announcement Friday. Benta, what does this executive order say?
The idea here is to make sure local governments follow through with a slate of new state housing laws that Polis has championed, like allowing ADUs, known as accessory dwelling units, or requiring denser housing development near transit. Most of these laws aren't in effect yet, and they don't apply to all parts of the state. It's mostly just larger cities, not rural areas. But if cities don't comply, they won't be eligible for some state grants.
What we're basically saying is, hey, we have limited state dollars. They need to go to communities that are part of the housing solution.
Why does Polis feel like he needs to make such a strong and attention-getting move?
Putting this in a larger perspective, when I've talked to voters from across the political spectrum, I hear from everyone that housing affordability is a huge problem in Colorado. It's expensive to live in urban areas, in the mountains, in the suburbs, and it's something people want the state to tackle. But there's really been a push and pull between Governor Polis and local governments. Some cities have said the state is too heavy-handed and wading into areas of local control. And in some cases, the state law does require new zoning or these parking codes. And we've heard from some local governments, like in Westminster, that they don't necessarily want to comply. This is Polis's effort to ensure cities and counties don't opt out of these laws. It tries to put some enforcement teeth behind them.
Can cities really just not comply with state housing laws? How is that legal?
Colorado's state constitution does allow cities and counties to form what's called a home rule government. In those places, local ordinances can supersede state law. And here's one example. North Glen passed a declaration last year and said because it's a home rule city, North Glen could limit how many unrelated people can live in a home. So that was directly pushing back against a law Colorado lawmakers had passed that said cities can't have these across-the-board caps on how many unrelated people can live together.
So this executive order, then, is the governor's way of getting around these more rebellious local governments.
You say rebellious, but I think they may prefer the term independent or home rule. But yes, and he did say there's some flexibility here, but communities do have to be trying to comply.
So these are the laws of Colorado, and of course, they need to be followed. I'm confident the courts would rule consistent with state law in the long run anyway, but it gets there much faster and more efficiently to get more housing done by incorporating it into the discretionary grant giving of the state.
I do want to make it clear, Governor Polis says the state is not going to tie any of this to critical infrastructure dollars, things like highway funds. It'll be grants on things like walkable communities, transit hubs, grants he described as discretionary, but I'm sure still very important to local communities. The state agencies involved, like the Energy Office and the Department of Transportation, will spend the next month identifying the exact dollar amount and all the grants this encompasses.
Have any of these local governments responded so far to the new executive order?
I reached out to the head of the Colorado Municipal League, Kevin Baumer. The Municipal League includes cities from across the state, and he said he's reviewing the executive order in detail to see whether there is a legal or regulatory basis for it. But regardless, he advocates for, quote, partnership, not preemption. And I'm still waiting to hear back from more people, but I'm sure as people dig into this, we'll be hearing a lot from cities and counties across the state about it.
Thanks, Benta.
Thanks.
Allegations of antisemitism at the Auraria campus in Denver are the focus of a federal civil rights review. Members of a Colorado advisory committee meet on Wednesday to continue that effort for the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. The Auraria campus is home to 3 schools, CU Denver, MSU of Denver, and the Community College of Denver. The review is centered on the month-long anti-war protest at the campus last year. Denverite reporter Paolo has been digging into public records and has new information about how campus leaders reacted to the protest. Thanks for joining us, Paolo.
Thanks for having me.
First, can you take us back to the start of the protest on the Auraria campus?
Yeah, you might remember it was part of this national movement on college campuses to protest the war in Gaza. In April last year, dozens of Auraria students set up camp on the main quad. The very next day, 40 people were handcuffed and arrested. That included students, professors, and other protesters not connected to these schools. Campus officials said protesters were breaking a policy that bans camping.
And that was a controversial decision at that time, to have police come in and arrest students.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I wanted to review emails from campus leaders through public records. Several lawmakers voiced concerns about those arrests. 3 Denver City Council members asked the campus to waive the camping ban in order to foster an environment of free speech. And the records indicate that campus officials considered several ways to compromise with the protesters, but ultimately they didn't do any of them.
This protest went on for weeks. What were protesters asking for?
They had a long list of demands, but basically a lot of it boiled down to wanting university leadership to take a stance on the war in Gaza and to divest from companies that operate in Israel.
In those emails that you reviewed, what stood out to you?
They really painted a picture about how campus leadership reacted to the protests behind closed doors. Auraria CEO Colleen Walker often complained about the protests. Walker went so far as to use the word terrorized in reference to protesters getting inside the executive office building. By mid-May, in those final days of the protest, Walker said in at least 2 emails that these were not peaceful protests and that the school could no longer tolerate them. In one email, she said the protest was costing the campus up to $15,000 each day in lost revenue from events.
Now, you also talked with protest organizers. What do they say about those claims of not being peaceful or even terrorizing?
Yeah, they've denied those accusations, and they point to student groups before them who protested the Vietnam and Iraq wars in the same way. Lucia Feast was one of the protesters.
I personally feel that there's a difference between violence against property and violence against people. To be clear, we never, as a tactic, went to damaging property either at our encampment.
We at Denverite did have several reporters who covered the protest, and while we were there, we didn't see any violence or serious property damage by the protesters.
There are accusations that some protesters were anti-Semitic. What do student leaders say about that?
Protest leaders have also denied accusations of antisemitism. They point out that some Jewish students joined them in calling for the end of violence on civilians in Gaza. I spoke with Khalid Hamou, who just graduated from CU Denver this weekend.
We oppose all forms of bigotry. It's kind of antithetical to our points of unity.
Student organizers also say when they became aware of any protesters misbehaving or harassing others, they kicked them out of the encampment. A Jewish student life organization on the Auraria campus, Hillel, was following the protests closely. Its executive director told me that most protesters were focused on the Israeli government, but he believes that some speech did cross the line into anti-Semitism.
It's been a year now. The campus is quiet again. The war in Gaza continues. So ultimately, what came out of the protest at the Auraria campus?
MSU Denver leaders did agree to disclose the school's investments in companies that operate in Israel, but they didn't agree to divest. And once the semester ended and students started heading home for the summer, the protesters agreed to vacate the encampment. Since then, campus protests have been more focused on the Trump administration's immigration actions, and that means the anti-war protests haven't really picked up steam again. Now, I've asked for interviews with campus leaders to see what they make of the protests now that over a year has passed, and I've submitted more public records requests to learn, but I haven't gotten those responses yet.
Paolo, Zialcita, thanks for your reporting.
Of course.
Accomplishment, celebration, and maybe even a little trepidation are all in the air for many of Colorado's newest college graduates. And with all the bustle and excitement of graduation ceremonies around the state,
Thank you for having me.
comes the commencement speech. There's a lot of pressure on speakers delivering those remarks. They have to say something inspiring, engaging, and memorable. And if that wasn't hard enough, they have to stay composed in front of hundreds or even thousands of people. This year, the University of Colorado Boulder turned to an alum and a 3-time Olympian. Emma Coburn drew from her sport of choice to deliver words of motivation.
Today isn't just the end of a chapter, it's the end of one race and the beginning of another. You've crossed this finish line, and now you're standing at the starting line of everything else that comes next.
The track and field athlete reflected on her own journey through her struggles and disappointments when training to become an Olympian.
There's something I want to talk about today, something I think about often, both as an athlete and just as a person trying to grow. It's something I call the gap. The gap is the space between where you are now and where you want to go, between who you are today and who you are working to become.
No two commencement speeches are the same. Often speakers will draw from their own history and cultural roots.
I started writing this thinking about how hard it must be as young people living in this country right now.
Author Tommy Orange addressed nearly 400 students graduating from Fort Lewis College in Durango.
To have worked as hard as I know you've had to work, wanting to believe everything you've been working toward will mean something, that there will be a country you will want to be a part of.
Orange is a member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. His native family roots feature in his first novel, They're There, which is a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. In his speech, he reflected on the world full of injustice.
As Native people, we saw the end of the world already, saw it start 500 years ago. And our people have not just survived the end of the world. We made ourselves new in the world. We ended up here intact, despite every attempt to erase us.
But he also wants graduates to recognize the potential for change.
The future you've been working toward isn't the one we're leaving you, but the one you're going to make. You've been seeing us, knowing how much we've failed you. I missed that you all have what it will take to make the future look like what you want it to look like. And I failed to understand that hope lives and shines most bright in the hearts and minds of students, people open and willing to learn.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow Colorado Today in your podcast app and leave a review. I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel.
And I'm Bazi Kanani. This is CPR News.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Shop online and get $30 off your first online order when you use code SAVE30 at checkout. Get the same prices, deals, and rewards as in-store. Get started at Safeway.com or the Safeway app.